In this lesson, we'll start to set up our eye controls. We'll have two levels of control over the eyes. We'll have subcontrollers that we can rotate for each eye separately, and then we'll create a main controller that will drive both eyes. We're going to take a slightly different approach. Instead of using an aim constraint or a targeting system, instead we'll create another form that is a very fast rig, and it just works out very well. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started by creating our subcontrollers. So as we saw in our first lesson, we're going to go ahead and work with spline spheres. So let's go ahead and create a circle. We can make it editable. We can go ahead and bring down its size. What we're basically doing here is adjusting the size of this, and then we can go ahead and clone it a few times and then attach the object. So just kind of scale this down to a rough size of what we'd like to see. Going back to model mode, let's go ahead and scroll up to the top. Let's go ahead and clone this object and rotate it down in our pitch axis 90 degrees. Now we can clone this again, this time rotate in what would be our bank axis, visually the bank axis. Let's go ahead and rotate this up so that our pitch axis is actually zeroed out on this object. Alright, great. So now we should be able to connect all of these together. Let's go ahead and select them all and choose Objects, Connect, and Delete. Keep in mind that if this was still a non-editable object and we try to do that, you might notice that the object disappears. So if that happens, it's just because that we need to first make those circles editable. Alright, let's say we move this in place. We'll go ahead and enable axis snapping. We're going to snap this over to the left eye joint. So grab the move tool. Another way to align an object is to use a position constraint tag, and then afterwards you just remove the tag. So that's just another way of centering objects if you like to take that route. I'm going to go to layers. Let's also unlock the attributes manager here, but I'm going to go to layers just to hide the face so we can snap to our eye joint. Great. Now bringing back the face and then making sure it's locked, we can start to rescale this. So bring it down so it wraps around the eye. That's going to work out well. Alright, so let's say we, from here, go in and rename this. That's going to be NMLI01. We'll add it to our controls layer. Okay, great. And let's also make sure that it is recolored. So under Basic, we'll enable Use Color and use our Screen Color tool. Oh, let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so our eye control is definitely coming along. What we want to do from here is go ahead and clone this over to the opposite eye. So I'll just go ahead and clone the object. Again, hide the face. Bring that over. Rename it. And then we can go ahead and recolor it. Okay. Okay, so next, we're going to want to make sure that these are parented. What we could actually do is have these stored underneath the upper jaw joint. That'll be fine. So let's go ahead and select the object. We can always create a copy of our objects manager. Go ahead and use scroll to first active to find the upper jaw. And now we can go ahead and grab the two animation controls here and have them stored underneath that hierarchy. Now before we go in and freeze these objects, we're going to make sure that their orientation matches to the eye joints. That way when we set up rotation constraints, again, there are no offsets. There's no shifting. But first, let's go ahead and make sure that each eye joint has been frozen. All right, so I'll just go ahead and one by one freeze the eye joints. Great. So now to match the orientation of our eye controllers to the eye joint before we set up the rotation constraint, we could actually use a rotation constraint to have that happen. All right, so we'd select our eye joint first, and then we would select our control object. And now we can go ahead and use our rotation constraint. And actually, I want to make sure that this is selected in the reverse order so that we constrain the orientation of our control to match the orientation of the eye joint. So we would first select what should be constrained, followed by the controller, which is the eye joint, and now we could go ahead and run that rotation constraint. All right, beautiful. So if we were to go ahead and select the control object, we can use scroll to first active to find it. There it is. You can see that the orientation is now matched. We no longer need the rotation constraint, so we can go ahead and delete that. And then we can freeze our animation control. Let's do the same thing for the right side. Again, we would first select the control, what we need to match. Following that, we'll select our eye joint, and then we'll go ahead and apply another rotation constraint. And we're just about finished. Okay, so once that's matched, we no longer need the tag. And now we can select our control and freeze it. Beautiful. All right, so now that that's matched, let's go ahead and recreate the rotation constraint, this time locking down our eye joint. So selecting the eye joint first, now we can go ahead and select our control object and choose constraint rotation. We can go ahead and rename this. That's going to be ROT constraint underscore LI01. Let's do the same thing for the right side. Grab the joint first, grab the animation control, and set up the constraint. And then go ahead and rename it. So ROT RI01. All right, beautiful. So let's go ahead and take a look. We will bring back our mesh from its layer. Let's make sure that's still locked down, that face layer, so we can go ahead and start to rotate, and you'll see that the eyes follow. Beautiful. And now when we go to the upper jaw, let's test this out. When we move that around, the eyes follow. Then we can go in and still rotate that control. Beautiful. It's going to look great when we create the fleshy eye rig. But still, that's really cool. So that finishes up our work here. We've already made sure that the objects have been stored in the controls layer, so we are good to go. And in the next lesson, we will finish setting up our eye controls. And then following that, we'll set up controls to drive the eyelids, and then our fleshy eyes to finish our eye rig.